All right. That should about do it. Just gotta get my tea to cool a little here. A little later than I want it to be, but oh well. Yes, loud slurpy noises. This too shall surely improve everyone's day. Okay. So last time we read the first six chapters? Six chapters of a novel in four parts called Brigands of the Moon. Um, by the name is eluding me. Oh, sugar. I can't remember his name. Well, it would take me longer to go and do this the hard way. Come on. Ray Cummings. It's by Ray Cummings. Ooh, too far. There we go. So this was first published in Astounding Stories of Super Science, March 1930. Yeah, I guess I don't really have much more to add to that. Wow, Protestations of a Lover's Ecstasy. Okay, reading a bit far ahead. I should note that this is a blind reading. I have not read this before. But the concept sounded charming and the writing style was reasonably easy to follow. And what was the last thing that happened here? Last thing that happened when we left off was a uh, foreshadowing element. I mean, asteroid, definitely an asteroid, came zooming by the ship that our protagonist and crew are on, and we observed that, and it was pretty and interesting and fascinating. Uh, but then our main character saw the girl Anita, whom he is smitten with, love at first sight, if you will, alone in a deck chair. The incident of the passing of the asteroid was over. I turned from the deck window. My heart leaped. The moment for which all day I had been subconsciously longing was at hand. Anita was sitting in a deck chair, momentarily alone. Her gaze was on me as I looked her way, and she smiled an invitation for me to join her. Is the last thing that we had going. I just realized I still have the We Will Be Starting Soon going. Let's turn that off. There we go. Better late than never, Frag. So, as always, and to anyone who is tuning in for the first time, I'm Fragath. I am your narrator for these Storytime Saturday blocks. I try to do these every Saturday. And yeah, I read short stories and sometimes novels. So, I guess without any further ado, adieu, I bid thee welcome. Chapter 7 Unspoken Love. Unspoken love! I think if I had yielded to the impulse of my heart I would have poured out all those protestations of a lover's ecstasy, incongruous here upon this starlit public deck, to a girl I hardly knew. I think, too, she might have received them with a tender acquiescence. The starlight was mirrored in her dark eyes, misty eyes with great reaches of unfathomable space in their depths. Yet I felt their tenderness. Unfathomable strangeness of love! Who am I to write of it, with all the poets of all the ages striving to express the unexpressible? A bond, strangely fashioned by nature, between me and this dark-haired, little earth beauty. As though marked by the stars, we were destined to be lovers. Thus ran the romance of my unspoken thoughts. But I was sitting quietly in the deck chair, striving to regard her gentle beauty impersonally, and saying, "But, Miss Prince, why are you and your brother going to Ferrok Sham? His business—" Even as I voiced it, I hated myself for such a question. So nimble is the human mind that mingled with my rhapsodies of love was my need for information of George Prince. "Oh," she said, "this is pleasure, not business, for George." It seemed to me that a shadow crossed her expressive face, but it was gone in an instant, and she smiled. "We have always wanted to travel. We are alone in the world, you know. Our parents died when we were children." I filled in her pause. "You will like Mars. So many interesting things to see." She nodded. "Yes, I understand so. Our Earth is so much the same all over, cast all in one mold." "But 100 or 200 years ago it was not, Miss Prince. I have read how the picturesque Orient, differing from, well, great New York or London, for instance—"
"Transportation did that," she interrupted eagerly. "Made everything the same. The people all look alike, dress alike."
We discussed it. She had an alert, eager mind, childlike with its curiosity, yet strangely matured, and her manner was naively earnest. Yet this was no clinging vine, this little Anita Prince. There was a firmness, a hint of masculine strength in her chin and in her manner.
"If I were a man, what wonders I could achieve in this marvelous age!"
Her sense of humor made herself laugh at herself.
"Easy for a girl to say that," she added.
"You have greater wonders to achieve, Miss Prince," I said impulsively.
"Yes? What are they?"
She had a very frank and level gaze, devoid of coquetry. My heart was pounding. "The wonders of the next generation. A little sun cast in your own gentle image." What madness! What clumsy, brash talk! I choked it off. But she took no offense. The dark rose petals of her cheeks were mantled deeper red, but she laughed.
"That is true."
She turned abruptly serious.
"I should not laugh. The wonders of the next generation, conquering humans marching on."
Her voice trailed away. My hand went to her arm. Strange tingling something with which poets call love. It burned and surged from my trembling fingers into the flesh of her forearm. The starlight glowed in her eyes. She seemed to be gazing, not at the silver-lit deck, but away into the distant reaches of the future. And she murmured,
"A little son cast in my own gentle image, but with the strength of his father."
one moment, just a breathless moment given us as we sat there with my hand burning her arm, as though we both might be seeing ourselves joined in a new individual, a little son cast in his mother's gentle image and with the strength of his father. Our moment, and then it was over. A step sounded. I sat back. The giant gray figure of Miko came past, his great cloak swaying, with his clanking sword ornament beneath it. His bullet head, with its close-clipped hair, was hatless. He gazed at us, swaggered past, and turned the deck corner. Our moment was gone. Anita said conventionally,
"It has been pleasant to talk with you, Mr. Haljan."
"But we'll have many more," I said. 10 days.
"You think we'll reach Ferrok Shahn on schedule?"
Yes, I think so. As I was saying, Miss Prince, you'll enjoy Mars. A strange, aggressively forward-looking people. An oppression seemed on her. She stirred in her chair.
"Yes, they are," she said vaguely. My brother and I know many Martians in Great New York."
She checked herself abruptly. Was she sorry she had said that? It seemed so. Miko was coming back. He stopped this time before us. "Your brother would see you, Anita. He sent me to bring you to his room." The glance he shot me had a touch of insolence. I stood up, and he towered a head over me.
Anita said, "Oh, yes, I'll come."
I bowed. "I will see you again, Miss Prince. I thank you for a pleasant half hour."
The Martian led her away. Her little figure was like a child with a giant. It seemed, as they passed the length of the deck with me staring after them, that he took her arm roughly, and that she shrank from him in fear. And they did not go inside. As though to show me that he had merely taken her from me, he stopped at a distant deck window and stood talking to her. Once he picked her up as one would pick up a child to show it some distant object through the window. "A little son with the strength of his father." Her words echoed in my mind. Was Anita afraid of this Martian's wooing, yet held to him by some power he might have over her brother? The vagrant thought struck me. Was it that?
Chapter 8. A Scream in the Night. We kept, on the Planetara, always the time and routine of our port of departure. The rest of that afternoon and evening were a blank of confusion to me. Anita's words, the touch of my hand upon her arm, that vast realm of what might be for us, like a glimpse of a magic land of happiness which I had seen in her eyes, and perhaps she had seen in mine, all this surged within me. I wandered about the vessel. I was not hungry. I did not go to the dining salon for dinner. I carried Johnson food and water to his cage, and sat, with my heat cylinder upon him, listening to his threats of what would happen when he could complain to the line's higher officials. But what was Johnson doing carrying a plan of the ship's control rooms in his pockets? And worse, how had he dared open Snap's box in the helio room and abstract the code passwords for this voyage? Without them, we would be an outlawed vessel, subject to arrest if any patrol hailed us. Had Johnson been planning to sell those passwords to Miko? I thought so. I tried to get the confession out of him, but could not. I had a brief consultation with Captain Carter. He was genuinely apprehensive now. The Planetara carried no long-range guns, and very few sidearms. A half dozen of the heat ray hand projectors, a few old-fashioned weapons of explosion rifles and automatic revolvers, and hand projectors with the new Benson curve light. We had models of this for curved vision, so that one might see around a corner, so to speak, and with them we could project the heat ray in a curve as well. The weapons were all in Carter's chart room, save the few we officers always carried. Carter was apprehensive, but of what he could not say. He had not thought that our plan to stop at the moon for treasure could affect his outward voyage. This outward voyage. Any danger would be upon the way back, when the Planetara would be adequately guarded with long-range electronic guns and manned with police soldiers. But now we were practically defenseless. I had a moment with Venza, but she had nothing new to communicate to me. And for half an hour I chatted with George Prince. He seemed a gay, pleasant young man. I could almost have fancied I liked him. Or was it because he was Anita's brother? He told me how he looked forward to traveling with her on Mars. No, he had never been there before, he said. He had a measure of Anita's earnest, naive personality. Or was he a very clever scoundrel, with irony lurking in his soft voice, and a chuckle that he could so befool me? Befool me! Oh my gosh. We'll talk again, Haljan. You interest me. I've enjoyed it.
He sauntered away from me, joining the saturnine Ob Hahn, with whom presently I heard him discussing religion. The arrest of Johnson had caused considerable comment among the passengers. A few had seen me drag him forward to the cage. The incident had been the subject of passenger discussion all afternoon. Captain Carter had posted a notice to the effect that Johnson's accounts had been found in serious error, and that Dr. Frank for this voyage would act in his stead. It was near midnight when Snap and I closed and sealed the helio room and started for the chart room, where we were to meet with Captain Carter and the other officers. The passengers had nearly all retired. A game was in progress in the smoking room, but the deck was almost deserted. Snap and I were passing along one of the interior corridors. The stateroom doors, with the illuminated names of the passengers, were all closed. The metal grid of the floor echoed our footsteps. Snap was in advance of me. His body suddenly rose in the air. He went like a balloon to the ceiling, struck it gently, and all in a heap came floating down and landed on the floor.
What in the infernal...
He was laughing as he picked himself up, but it was a brief laugh. We knew what had happened. The artificial gravity controls in the base of the ship, which by magnetic force gave us normality aboard, were being tampered with. For just this instant, this particular small section of this corridor had been cut off. The slight bulk of the Planetara, floating in space, had no appreciable gravity pull on Snap's body, and the impulse of his step as he came to the unmagnetized area of the corridor had thrown him to the ceiling. The area was normal now. Snap and I tested it gingerly. He gripped me.
That never went wrong by accident, Greg. Someone down there...
We rushed to the nearest descending ladder. In the deserted lower room, the bank of dials stood neglected. A score of dials and switches were here, governing the magnetism of different areas of the ship. There should have been a night operator, but he was gone. Then we saw him lying nearby, face sprawled down on the floor. In the silence and dim, lurid glow of the fluorescent tubes, we stood holding our breaths, peering and listening. No one here. The guard was not dead. He lay unconscious from a blow on the head. A brawny fellow. We had him revived in a few moments. A broadcast flash of the call buzz brought Dr. Frank in haste from the chart room.
What's the matter?
We pointed at the unconscious man. Someone was here, I said hastily, experimenting with the magnetic switches, evidently unfamiliar with them, pulling one or another to test their workings and so see the reactions on the dials. We told him what had happened to Snap in the upper corridor. Dr. Frank revived the guard in a moment. He was no worse off for the episode, save a lump on his head and a nasty headache. But he had little to tell us. He had heard a step, saw nothing, and then had been struck on the head by some invisible assailant. We left him nursing his head, sitting belligerent at his post, armed now with my heat ray cylinder, which I loaned him.
"Strange doin's this voyage," he told us. "All the crew knows it. All been talking about it. I stick it out now, but when we get back home, I'm done with this star traveling. I belong in the sea anyway. A good old freighter is all right for me."
We hurried back to the upper level. We would indeed have to plan something at this chart room conference. This was the first tangible attack our adversaries had made. We were on the passenger deck, headed for the chart room, when all three of us stopped short, frozen with horror. Through the silent passenger quarters a scream rang out. A girl's shuddering, gasping scream. Terror in it. Horror. Or a scream of agony. In the silence of the dully vibrating ship it was utterly horrible. It lasted an instant, a single long scream, and was abruptly stilled. And with blood pounding my temples and rushing like ice through my veins, I recognized it. Anita. Chapter 9. The Murder in A22.
Good God, what was that?
Dr. Frank's face had gone white in the starlight. Snap stood like a statue of horror. The deck here was patched as always, silver radiance from the deck ports. The empty deck chairs stood about. The scream was stilled, but now we heard a commotion inside, the rasp of opening cabin doors, questions from frightened passengers, the scurry of feet. I found my voice. "Anita! Anita Prince!"
Come on, shouted Snap. Was it the Prince girl? I thought so too. In her stateroom, A22.
He was dashing for the lounge archway. Dr. Frank and I followed. I realized that we passed the deck door and window of A22. But they were dark and evidently sealed on the inside. The dim lounge was in a turmoil, passengers standing at their cabin doors. I heard Sir Arthur Coniston.
I say, what was that? Over there, said another man. Come back inside, Martha.
He shoved his wife back.
Mr. Haljan.
He plucked at me as I went past. I shouted, "Go back to your rooms. We want order here. Keep back." We came to the twin doors of A22 and A20. Both were closed. Dr. Frank was in advance of Snap and me. He paused at the sound of Captain Carter's voice behind us.
Was it from in there? Wait a moment.
Carter dashed up. He had a large heat ray projector in his hand. He shoved us aside.
Let me in first. Is the door sealed? Greg, keep those passengers back.
The door was not sealed. Carter burst into the room. I heard him gasp,
"Good God!"
Snap and I shoved back 3 or 4 crowding passengers, and in that instant Dr. Frank had been in the room and out again. "There's been an accident. Get back, Greg. Snap, help him keep the crowd away." He shoved me forcibly. From within, Carter was shouting,
"Keep them out! Where are you, Frank? Come back here! Send a flash for Balk! I want Balk!"
Dr. Frank went back into the room and banged the cabin door upon Snap and me. I was unarmed. I had loaned my cylinder to the guard in the lower corridor. Weapon in hand, Snap forced the panic-stricken passengers back to their rooms.
It's all right. An accident. Miss Prince is hurt.
Snap reassured them glibly, but he knew no more about it than I. Moa, with a nightrobe drawn tight around her thin, tall figure, edged up to me. "What has happened?" said Haljan. I gazed around for her brother Miko, but did not see him. "An accident," I said shortly. "Go back to your room. Captain's orders." She eyed me, and then retreated. Snap was threatening everybody with his cylinder. Balk dashed up.
"What the hell? Where's Carter?"
"In there." I pounded on A22. It opened cautiously. I could only see Carter, but I heard the murmuring voice of Dr. Frank through the interior connecting door to A20. The captain rasped,
"Get out, Haljan!" "Oh, is that you, Balk? Come in."
He admitted the older officer and slammed the door again upon me, and immediately reopened it.
"Greg, keep the passengers quiet. Tell them everything's all right. Miss Prince got frightened, that's all. Then go up to the turret. Tell Blackstone what's happened."
"But I don't know what's happened," I protested miserably. Carter was grim and white. He whispered,
"I think it may turn out to be murder, Greg. No, not dead yet. Dr. Frank is trying. Don't stand there like an ass, man. Get to the turret. Verify our trajectory. No, wait."
The captain was almost incoherent.
"Wait a minute, I don't mean that. Tell Snap to watch his helio room. Greg, you and Blackstone stay in the chart room. Arm yourselves and guard our weapons. By God, this murderer, whoever he is."
I stammered, "If she dies, will you flash us word?" He stared at me strangely.
"I'll be there presently, Greg."
He slammed the door upon me. I followed his orders, but it was like a dream of horror. The turmoil of the ship gradually quieted. Snap went to the helio room. Blackstone and I sat in the tiny steel chart room. How much time passed, I do not know. I was confused. Anita hurt. She might die. Murdered. But why? By whom? Had George Prince been in his own room when the attack came? I thought now I recalled hearing the low murmur of his voice in there with Dr. Frank and Carter. Where was Miko? It stabbed at me. I had not seen him among the passengers in the lounge. Carter came into the chart room.
Greg, you get to bed. You look like a ghost.
But
She's not dead. She may live. Dr. Frank and her brother are with her. They're doing all they can.
he told us what had happened. Anita and George Prince had both been asleep, each in their respective rooms. Someone unknown had opened Anita's corridor door. Wasn't it sealed? I demanded.
Yes, but the intruder opened it.
Burst it? I didn't think it was broken.
It wasn't broken. The assailant opened it somehow and assaulted Miss Prince. Shot her in the chest with a heat ray. Her left lung.
She's
She is conscious?
Balk demanded.
Yes, but she did not see who did it, nor did Prince. Her scream awakened him, but the intruder evidently fled out the corridor door of A22 the way he entered.
I stood, weak and shaken, at the chart room entrance. A little son cast in the gentle image of his mother, but with the strength of his father. But Anita, dying perhaps, and all my dreams were fading into a memory of what might have been.
You go to bed, Greg. We don't need you.
I was glad enough to get away. I would lie down for an hour, and then go to Anita's stateroom. I demand that Dr. Frank let me see her, if only for a moment. I went to the stern deck space where my cubby was located. My mind was confused, but some instinct within me made me verify the seals of my door and window. They were intact. I entered cautiously, switched on the dimmer of the tube lights, and searched the room. It had only a bunk, my tiny desk, a chair, and clothes robe. There was no evidence of any intruder here. I set my door and window alarm. Then I audiophoned the helio room. Snap,
Yes?
I told him about Anita. Carter cut in on us from the chart room.
Start that, you fools!
We cut off. Fully dressed, I flung myself on my bed. Anita might die. I must have fallen into a tortured sleep. I was awakened by the sound of my alarm buzzer. Someone was tampering with my door. Then the buzzer ceased. The marauder outside must have found a way of silencing it. But it had done its work, awakened me. I had switched off the light. My cubby was Stygian dark. A heat cylinder was in the bunk bracket over my head. I searched for it, pried it loose softly. I was fully awake, alert. I could hear a faint sizzling. Someone outside trying to unseal the door. In the darkness, cylinder in hand, I crept from the bunk, crouched at the door. This time I would capture or kill this night prowler. The sizzling was faintly audible. My door seal was breaking. Upon impulse, I reached for the door, jerked it open. No one there! The starlit segment of deck was empty. But I had leaped, and I struck a solid body crouching in the doorway. A giant man, Miko. His electronized metallic robe burned my hands. I lunged against him. I was almost as surprised as he. I shot, but the stab of heat evidently missed him. The shock of my encounter close-circuited his robe. He materialized in the starlight. A brief, savage encounter. He struck the weapon from my hand. He had dropped his hydrogen torch and tried to grip me, but I twisted away from his hold. So it's you!
Be quiet, Greg Haljan. I only want to talk.
Without warning, a stab of radiance shot from a weapon in his hand. It caught me, ran like ice through my veins, seized and numbed my limbs. I fell helpless to the deck, nerves and muscles paralyzed. My tongue was thick and inert. I could not speak nor move, but I could see Miko bending over me, and hear him.
I don't want to kill you, Haljan. We need you.
He gathered me up like a bundle in his huge arms, carried me swiftly across the deserted deck. Snap's helio room in the network under the dome was diagonally overhead. A white actinic light shot from it, caught us, bathed us. Snap had been awake, had heard the slight commotion of our encounter. His voice rang shrilly.
Stop! I'll shoot!
His warning siren rang out to arouse the ship. His spotlight clung to us. Miko ran with me a few steps. Then he cursed and dropped me, fled away. I fell like a sack of carbide to the deck. My senses faded into blackness.
He's all right now.
I was in the chart room with Captain Carter, Snap, and Dr. Frank bending over me. The surgeon said,
Can you speak now, Greg?
I tried it. My tongue was thick, but it would move.
Yes.
I was soon revived. I sat up with Dr. Frank vigorously rubbing me.
I'm all right.
I told them what had happened. Captain Carter said abruptly,
Yes, we know that. And it was Miko who also killed Anita Prince. She told us before she died.
Died? I leapt to my feet. She died.
Yes, Greg. An hour ago, Miko got into her stateroom and tried to force his love on her. She repulsed him. He killed her.
It struck me blank. And then with a rush came the thought, he says Miko killed her. I heard myself stammering, why, we must get him! I gathered my wits. A surge of hate swept me, a wild desire for vengeance.
Why, by God, where is he? Why don't you go get him? I'll get him. I'll kill him, I tell you.
Easy, Greg. Dr. Frank gripped me. The captain said gently,
We know how you feel, Greg. She told us before she died. I'll bring him here. I'll bring him in here to you, but I'll kill him, I tell you. No, you won't, lad. You're hysterical now. We don't want him killed, not attacked even. Not yet. We'll explain later.
They sat me down, calming me. Anita dead. The door of the shining garden was closed. A brief glimpse given to me and to her of what might have been. And now she was dead. Chapter 10. A speck of human earth dust falling free. I had not been able at first to understand why Captain Carter wanted Miko left at liberty. With me there was that cry of vengeance, as though to strike Miko down would somehow lessen my own grief at Anita's loss. Whatever Carter's purpose, Snap had not known it. But Balch and Dr. Frank were in the captain's confidence, all three of them working on some plan of action. Snap and I argued it, and thought we could fathom it, and in spite of my desire to kill Miko, the thing looked reasonable. It was obvious that at least two of our passengers were plotting with Miko and George Prince, trying during this voyage to learn what they could about Grantline's activities on the moon, scheming doubtless to seize the treasure when the Planetara stopped at the moon on the return voyage. I thought I could name those masquerading passengers. Ob Hahn, supposedly a Venus mystic, and Rance Rankin, who called himself an American magician. Those two, Snap and I agreed, seemed most suspicious. And there was the purser. With my hysteria still on me, I sat for a time on the deck outside the chart room with Snap. Then Carter summoned us back, and we sat listening while he, Balch, and Dr. Frank went on with their conference. Listening to them, I could not but agree that our best plan was to secure evidence which would incriminate all who were concerned in the plot. Miko, we were convinced, had been the Martian who followed Snap and me from Halsey's office in Great New York. George Prince had doubtless been the invisible eavesdropper outside the helio room. He knew, and had told the others, that Grantline had found radium ore on the moon, that the Planetara would stop there on the way home. But we could not incarcerate George Prince for being an eavesdropper, nor had we the faintest tangible evidence against Ob Hahn or Rance Rankin, and even the purser would probably be released by the Interplanetary Court of Ferrok-Shahn when it heard our evidence. There was only Miko. We could arrest him for the murder of Anita, but the others would be put on their guard. It was Carter's idea to let Miko remain at liberty for a time and see if we could not identify and incriminate his fellows. The murder of Anita obviously had nothing to do with any plot against the Grantline Moon treasure.
Why, exclaimed Balk, there might be, probably are, huge Martian interests concerned in this thing. These men here aboard are only emissaries making this voyage to learn what they can. When they get back to Ferrok-Shahn, they'll make their report, and then we'll have a real danger on our hands. Why, an outlaw ship could be launched from Ferrok-Shahn that would beat us back to the moon, and Grantline is entirely without warning of any danger.
It seemed obvious. Unscrupulous, moneyed criminals in Ferrok-Shahn would be dangerous indeed, once these details of Grantline were given them. And so now it was decided that in the remaining 9 days of our outward voyage, we would attempt to secure enough evidence to arrest all these plotters.
I'll have them all in the cage when we land, Carter declared grimly. They'll make no report to their principals. The thing will end, be stamped out.
Ah, the futile plans of men. Yet we thought it practical. We were all doubly armed now, explosive bullet projectors and heat ray cylinders, and we had several eavesdropping microphones which we planned to use whenever occasion offered. It was now Earth Eastern Time, AM. 28 hours only of this eventful voyage were past. That was an incoherent sentence, but okay. The Planetara was some 6 million miles from the Earth. It blazed behind us, a tremendous giant. The body of Anita was being made ready for burial. George Prince was still in his stateroom. Glutz, effeminate little hairdresser, who waxed rich acting as beauty doctor for the women passengers, and who in his youth had been an undertaker, had gone with Dr. Frank to prepare the body. Gruesome details. I tried not to think of them. I sat, numbed, in the chart room. An astronomical burial. There was little precedent for it. I dragged myself to the stern deck space where, at 5 a.m., the ceremony took place. Most of the passengers were asleep, unaware of all this, which was why Carter hastened it. We were a solemn little group, gathered there in the checkered starlight with the great vault of the heavens around us. A dismantled electronic projector, necessary when a long-range gun was mounted, had been rigged up in one of the deck ports. They brought out the body. I stood apart, gazing reluctantly at the small bundle, wrapped like a mummy in the dark metallic screen cloth. A patch of black silk rested over her face. Four cabin stewards carried her. Bleh. 4 cabin stewards carried her, and behind her walked George Prince. A long black robe covered him, but his head was bare. And suddenly he reminded me of the ancient play character of Hamlet. His black, wavy hair, his finely chiseled, pallid face, set now in a stern, patrician cast. And staring, I realized that however much of a villain this man not yet 30 might be, at this instant, walking beside the body of his dead sister, he was stricken with grief. He loved that sister with whom he had lived since childhood, and to see him now, with his set white face, no one could doubt it. The little procession stopped in a patch of starlight by the port. They rested the body on a bank of chairs. The black-robed chaplain, roused from his bed and still trembling from excitement of all this sudden, inexplicable death on board, said a brief, solemn little prayer, an appeal that the almighty ruler of all these blazing worlds might guard the soul of this gentle girl whose mortal remains were now to be returned to him. Ah, if ever God seemed hovering close, it was now at this instant, on this starlit deck floating in the black void of space. Then Carter for just a moment removed the black shroud from her face. I saw her brother gaze silently, saw him stoop and implant a kiss, and turned away. I did not want to look, but I found myself moving slowly forward. She lay, so beautiful, her face white and calm and peaceful in death. My sight blurred. Words seemed to echo. A little son cast in the gentle image of his mother.
Easy, Greg,
Snap was whispering to me. He had his arm around me.
come on away.
They tied the shroud over her face. I did not see them as they put her body in the tube, sent it through the exhaust chamber, and dropped it. But a moment later I saw it, a small black oblong bundle, hovering beside us. It was perhaps 100 feet away, circling us. Held by the Planetara's bulk, it had momentarily become our satellite. It swung around us like a moon. Gruesome satellite, by nature's laws forever to follow us. Then, from another tube at the bow, Blackstone operated a small Zedco ray projector. Its dull light caught the floating bundle, neutralizing its metallic wrappings. It swung off at a tangent, speeding, falling free in the dome of the heavens, a rotating black oblong. But in a moment, distance dwindled it to a speck, a dull silver dot with the sunlight on it, a speck of human earth dust, falling free. It vanished. Anita, gone. In my heart was an echo of the prayer that the Almighty might watch over her and guard her always. Chapter 11. The Electrical Eavesdropper. I turned from the deck. Miko was near me, so he had dared to show himself here among us. But I realized that he could not be aware we knew he was the murderer. George Prince had been asleep, had not seen Miko with Anita. Miko, with impulsive rage, had shot the girl and escaped. No doubt he was cursing himself for having done it. And he could very well assume that Anita had died without regaining consciousness to tell who had killed her. He gazed at me now, here on the deck. I thought for an instant he was coming over to talk to me. Though he probably considered he was not suspected of the murder of Anita, he realized, of course, that his attack on me was known. He must have wondered what action Captain Carter would take. But he did not approach me. He moved away and went inside. Moa had been near him, and as though by prearrangement with him, she now accosted me. "I want to speak with you, Set Haljan." "Go ahead." I felt an instinctive aversion for this Martian girl. Yet she was not unattractive. Over 6 feet tall, straight and slim, sleek blonde hair, rather a handsome face. Not gray like the burly Miko, but pink and white. Stern-lipped, yet feminine too. She was smiling gravely now. Her blue eyes regarded me keenly. She said gently, "A sad occurrence, Greg Haljan, and mysterious. I would not question you." "Is that all you have to say?" I demanded, when she paused. "No. You are a handsome man, Greg, attractive to women, to any Martian woman." She said it impulsively. Admiration for me was on her face, in her eyes. A man cannot miss it. "Thank you." "I mean, I would be your friend. My brother Miko is so sorry about what happened between you and him this morning. He only wanted to talk to you, and he came to your cubby door—" "With a torch to break its seal," I interjected. She waved that away. He was afraid you would not admit him. He told you he would not hurt you. And so he struck me with one of your cursed Martian paralyzing rays? He is sorry. She seemed gauging me, trying, no doubt, to find out what reprisal would be taken against her brother. I felt sure that Moa was as active as a man in any plan that was under way to capture the Grantline treasure. Miko, with his ungovernable temper, was doing things that put their plans in jeopardy. I demanded abruptly, "What did your brother want to talk to me about?" "Me," she said surprisingly. "I sent him. A Martian girl goes after what she wants. Did you know that?" She swung on her heel and left me. I puzzled over it. Was that why Miko had struck me down and was carrying me off? Was my accursed masculine beauty so attractive to this Martian girl? I did not think so. I could not believe that all these incidents were so unrelated to what I knew was the main undercurrent. They wanted me, had tried to capture me, for something else than because Moa liked my looks. Dr. Frank found me mooning alone.
Go to bed, Greg. You look awful.
I don't want to go to bed.
Where's Snap?
I don't know. He was here a while ago. I had not seen him since the burial of Anita.
The captain wants him.
The surgeon left me. Within an hour, the morning siren would arouse the passengers. I was seated in a secluded corner of the deck when George Prince came along. He went past me, a slight, somber, dark-robed figure. He had on high, thick boots. A hood was over his head, but as he saw me, he pushed it back and dropped down beside me. But for a moment he did not speak. His face showed pallid in the pallid star gleams. "She said you loved her." His soft voice was throaty with emotion. "Yes." I said it almost against my will. There seemed a bond springing between this bereaved brother and me. He added, so softly I could barely hear him, "That makes you, I think, almost my friend, and you thought you were my enemy." I held my answer. An incautious tongue running under emotion is a dangerous thing, and I was sure of nothing. He went on, "Almost my friend, because we both loved her, and she loved us both." He was hardly more than whispering. "And there is aboard one whom we both hate." "Miko!" It burst from me.
Yes, but do not say it."
Another silence fell between us. He brushed back the black curls from his forehead, and his dark eyes searched mine. "Have you an eavesdropping microphone, Haljan?" I hesitated. "Yes." "I was thinking." He leaned closer toward me. "If, in half an hour, you could use it upon Miko's cabin, I would rather tell you than the captain or anyone else. The cabin will be insulated, but I shall find a way of cutting off that insulation so that you may hear." So George Prince had turned with us. The shock of his sister's death, himself allied to her murderer. It had been too much for him. He was with us. Yet his help must be given secretly. Miko would kill him in an instant if it became known. He had been watchful of the deck. He stood up now. "I think that is all." As he turned away, I murmured, "But I do thank you." The name Set Miko glowed upon the small metal door. It was in a transverse corridor similar to A22. The corridor was forward of the lounge. It opened off the small circular library. The library was unoccupied and unlighted, dim with only the reflected lights from the nearby passages. I crouched behind a cylinder case. The door of Miko's room was in sight, being some 30 feet away from me. I waited perhaps 5 minutes. No one entered. Then I realized that doubtless the conspirators were already there. I set my tiny eavesdropper on the library floor beside me, connected its little battery, focused its projector. Was Miko's room insulated? I could not tell. There was a small ventilating grid above the door. Across its opening, if the room were insulated, a blue sheen of radiance would be showing, and there would be a faint hum. But from this distance I could not see or hear such details, and I was afraid to approach closer. Once in the transverse corridor, I would have no place to hide, no way of escape. If anyone approached Miko's door, I would be discovered. I threw the current into my little apparatus. I prayed, if it met interference, that the slight sound would pass unnoticed. George Prince had said he would make opportunity to disconnect the room's insulation. He had evidently done so. I picked up the interior sounds at once. My headphone vibrated with them, and with trembling fingers on the little dial between my knees, as I crouched in the darkness behind the cylinder case, I synchronized.
Johnson is a fool. It was Miko's voice. We must have the passwords.
He got them from the helio room. A man's voice. I puzzled over it at first, then recognized it. Rance Rankin.
Miko said, He is a fool, walking around this ship as though with letters blazoned on his forehead. Watch me, I need watching. Ha! No wonder they apprehended him.
Was George Prince in there? Rankin's voice said, He would have turned the papers over to us. I would not blame him too much. What harm?
Oh, I'll release him, Miko declared. What harm? That braying ass did us plenty of harm. He has lost the passwords. Better he had left them in the helio room.
Moa was in the room. Her voice said, We've got to have them. The Planetara, upon such an important voyage as this, may be watched. How do we know? It is no doubt, Rankin said quietly. We ought to have the passwords. When we are in control of this ship. It sent a shiver through me. Were they planning to try and seize the Planetara? Now? It seemed so. Johnson undoubtedly memorized them, Moa was saying. When we get him out.
Han needs to do that, at the signal, Miko added. George could do it better, perhaps.
And then I heard George Prince for the first time. He murmured, I will try.
No need, said Miko. I praise where praise is deserved, and I have little praise for you now, George.
I could not see what happened. A look, perhaps, which Prince could not avoid giving this man he had come to hate. Miko doubtless saw it, and the Martian's hot anger leaped. Rankin said hurriedly, Stop that! And Moa, Leave him alone! Sit down, you fool! I could hear the sound of a scuffle. A blow, a cry half suppressed from George Prince. Then Miko,
I will not hurt him, craven coward. Look at him, hating me, frightened.
I could fancy George Prince sitting there with murder in his heart, and Miko taunting him.
Hates me now because I shot his sister.
Moa, Hush!
I will not. Why should I not say it? I will tell you something else, George Prince. It was not Anita I shot at, but you. I meant nothing for her but love. If you had not interfered.
This was different from what we had figured. George Prince had come in from his own room, had tried to rescue his sister, and in the scuffle, Anita had taken the shot intended for George.
I did not even know I had hit her, Miko was saying. Not until I heard she was dead.
He added sardonically,
I hoped it was you I had hit, George. And I will tell you this, you hate me no more than I hate you. If it were not for your knowledge of radium ores.
Is this to be a personal wrangle? Rankin interrupted. I thought we were here to plan.
It is planned, Miko said shortly. I give orders, I do not plan. I am waiting now for the moment.
He checked himself. Moa said, "Does Rankin understand that no harm is to come to Greg Haljan?"
Yes, said Rankin, and Dean. We need them, of course. But you cannot make Dean send messages if he refuses, nor make Haljan navigate.
I know enough to check on them, Miko said grimly. They will not fool me. And they will obey me, have no fear. A little touch of sulfuric. His laugh was gruesome. It makes the most stubborn very willing.
I wish, said Moa, we had Haljan safely hidden. If he is hurt, killed. So that was why Miko had tried to capture me? To keep me safe so that I might navigate the ship? It occurred to me that I should get Carter at once. A plot to seize the Planetara? But when? I froze with startled horror. The diaphragms at my ears rang with Miko's words.
I have set the time for now. In 2 minutes.
It seemed to startle both Rankin and George Prince almost as much as I. Both exclaimed,
No! No? Why not? Everyone is at his post.
Prince repeated, "No!" And Rankin,
But can we trust them? The stewards? The crew?
8 of them are our 8 of them are our own men. You didn't know that, Rankin? They've been aboard the Planetara for several voyages. Oh, this is no quickly planned affair, even though we let you in on it so recently. You and Johnson. By God.
I crouched, tense. There was a commotion in the stateroom. Miko had discovered that his insulation was cut off. He had evidently leaped to his feet. I heard a chair overturn. And the Martians roar,
It's off! Did you do that, Prince? By God, if I thought...
My apparatus went suddenly dead as Miko flung on his insulation. I lost my wits in the confusion. I should have instantly taken off my vibrations. There was interference. It showed in the dark space of the ventilator grid over Miko's doorway. A snapping in the air there, a swirl of sparks. I heard with my unaided ears Miko's roar over his insulation.
By God, they're listening!
A scream of a hand siren sounded from his stateroom. It rang over the ship. His signal. I heard it answered from some distant point. And then a shot. A commotion in the lower corridors. The attack on the Planetara had started. I was on my feet. The shouts of startled passengers sounded, a turmoil beginning everywhere. I stood momentarily transfixed. The door of Miko's stateroom burst open. He stood there, with Moa, Rankin, and George Prince crowding behind him. He saw me.
You, Greg Haljan!
He came leaping at me. Chapter 12. The Weightless Combat. I was taken wholly by surprise. There was an instant when I stood numbed, fumbling for a weapon at my belt, undecided whether to run or stand my ground. Miko was no more than 20 feet from me. He checked his forward rush. The light from an overhead tube was on him. I saw that in his hand the cylinder projector of his paralyzing ray. I plucked my heat cylinder from my belt and fired without taking aim. My tiny heat beam flashed. I must have grazed Miko's hand. His roar of anger and pain rang out over the turmoil. He dropped his weapon, then stooped to pick it up. But Moa forestalled him. She leaped and seized it.
Careful! Fool, you promised not to hurt him!
A confusion of swift action. Rankin had turned and darted away. I saw George Prince stumbling half in front of the struggling Miko and Moa. And I heard footsteps beside me. A hand gripped me, jerked at me. Over the turmoil, Prince's voice sounded. "Greg! Haljan!" I recall I had the impression that Prince was frightened. He had half fallen in front of Miko. And there was Miko's voice.
Let go of me!
And Moa. "Come!" It was Balk gripping me.
Greg, this way! Run! Get out of here! He'll kill you with that ray!
Miko's ray flashed, but George Prince had knocked at his arm. I did not fire again. Prince was in the way. Balk, who was unarmed, shoved me violently back.
Greg, the chart room!
I turned and ran, with Balk after me. Prince had fallen, or been felled by Miko. A flash followed me. Miko's weapon, but again it missed. He did not pursue me. He ran the other way, through the port side door of the library. Balk and I found ourselves in the lounge. Shouting, frightened passengers were everywhere. The place was in wild confusion, the whole ship ringing now with shouts.
To the chart room, Greg!
I called to the passengers. Get back to your rooms! I followed Balk. We ran through the archway to the deck. In the starlight I saw figures scurrying aft, but none were near us. The deck forward was dim with heavy shadows. The oval window and door of the chart room were blue-yellow from the tube lights inside. No one seemed on the deck there. And then, as we approached, I saw, further forward in the bow, the trap door to the cage standing open. Johnson had been released. From one of the chart room windows a heat ray sizzled. It barely missed us. Balk shouted,
Carter, don't!
The captain called.
Oh, you, Balk and Haljan!
He came out on the deck as we rushed up. His left arm was dangling limp.
God, this...
He got no further. From the turret overhead a tiny search beam came down and disclosed us. Blackstone was supposed to be up on duty up there, with a course master at the controls. But glancing up, illumined by the turret lights, the figures of Alb Hahn in his purple-white robes, and Johnson the purser. And on the turret balcony, two fallen men, Blackstone and the course master. Johnson was training the spotlight on us. And Hahn fired a Martian ray. It struck Balk beside me. He dropped. Carter was shouting,
Inside! Greg, get inside!
I stopped to raise up Balk. Another beam came down. A heat ray this time. It caught the fallen Balk full in the chest, piercing him through. The smell of his burning flesh rose to sicken me. He was dead. I dropped his body. Carter shoved me into the chart room. In the small, steel-lined room, Carter and I slid the door closed. We were alone here. The thing had come so quickly it had taken Captain Carter, like us all, wholly unawares. We had anticipated spying eavesdroppers, but not this open brigandage. No more than a minute or two had passed since Miko's siren in his stateroom had given the signal for the attack. Carter had been in the chart room. Blackstone was in the turret. At the outbreak of confusion, Carter dashed out to see Hahn releasing Johnson from the cage. From the forward chart room window, I could see where Hahn with a torch had broken the cage seal. The torch lay on the deck. There had been an exchange of shots. Carter's arm was paralyzed. Johnson and Hahn had escaped. Carter was as confused as I. There had simultaneously been an encounter up in the turret. Blackstone and the course master were killed. The lookout had been shot from his post in the forward observatory. His body dangled now, twisted half in and half out of his window. We could see several of Miko's men, erstwhile members of our crew and steward corps, scurrying from the turret along the upper bridges toward the dark and silent helio room. Snap was up there. But was he? The helio room glowed suddenly with dim light, but there was no evidence of a fight there. The fighting seemed mostly below the deck, down in the hull corridors. A blended horror of sounds came up to us. Screams, shouts, and the hissing and snapping of ray weapons. Our crew, such of them as were loyal, were making a stand down below. But it was brief. Within a minute it died away. The passengers, amidships in the superstructure, were still shouting. Then above them Miko's roar sounded.
Be quiet! Go in your rooms! You will not be harmed!
The brigands in these few minutes were in control of the ship. All but this little chart room where, with most of the ship's weapons, Carter and I were entrenched.
God, Greg, that this should come upon us.
Carter was fumbling with the chart room weapons.
Here, Greg, help me. What have you got? Heat ray? That's all I had ready.
It struck me then, as I helped him make the connections, that Carter in this crisis was at best an inefficient commander. His red face had gone splotchy purple. His hands were trembling. Skilled as captain of a peaceful liner, he was at a loss now. Nor could I blame him. It is easy to say we might have taken warning, done this or done that, and come triumphant through this attack, but only the fool looks backward and says, I would have done better. I tried to summon my wits. The ship was lost to us, unless Carter and I could do something. Our futile weapons! They were all here, 4 or 5 heat ray hand projectors that could send a pencil ray 100 feet or so. I shot one diagonally up at the turret where Johnson was leering down at our rear window, but he saw my gesture and dropped back out of sight. The heat beam flashed harmlessly up and struck the turret roof. Then across the turret window came a sheen of radiance, an electro barrage, and behind it, Han's suave, evil face appeared. He shouted down, "We have orders to spare you, Gregg Haljan, or you would have been killed long ago." My answering shot hit his barrage with a shower of sparks, behind which he stood unmoved. Carter handed me another weapon.
Greg, try this.
I leveled the old explosive bullet projector. Carter crouched beside me. But before I could press the trigger, from somewhere down the starlit deck, an electro beam hit me. The little rifle exploded, burst its breech. I sank back to the floor, tingling from the shock of the hostile current. My hands were blackened from the exploding powder. Carter seized me.
No use. Hurt?
No. The stars through the dome windows were swinging. A long swing. The shadows and starlit patches on the deck were all shifting. The Planetara was turning. The heavens revolved in a great round sweep of movement, then settled as we took our new course. Han at the turret controls had swung us. The earth and the sun showed over our bow quarter. The sunlight mingled red-yellow with the brilliant starlight. Han's signals were sounding. I heard them answered from the mechanism rooms down below. Brigands there, in full control. The gravity plates were being set to the new positions. We were on our new course, headed to a point or two off Earth line. Not headed for the moon? I wondered. Carter and I were planning nothing. What was there to plan? We were under observation. A Martian paralyzing ray, or electronic beam, far more deadly than our own puny police weapons, would have struck us the instant we tried to leave the chart room. My swift-running thoughts were interrupted by a shout from down the deck. At a corner of the cabin's superstructure, some 50 feet from our windows, the figure of Miko appeared. A barrage radiance hung around him like a shimmering mantle. His voice sounded,
Gregg Haljan, do you yield?
Carter leaped up from where he and I were crouching. Against all reason of safety, he leaned from the low window, waving his ham-like fist.
Yield? No! I'm in command here, you pirate! Brigand! Murderer!
I pushed him back. Careful! He was spluttering, and over it Miko's sardonic laugh sounded.
Ha ha ha! Very well, but will you talk? Shall we argue about it?
I stood up. What do you want to say, Miko? Behind him, the tall, thin figure of his sister showed. She was plucking at him. He turned violently.
I won't hurt him. Gregg Haljan, is this a truce? You will not shoot?
He was shielding Moa. No, I called. For a moment, no. A truce. What is it you want to say? I could hear the babble of passengers who were herded in the herded into the cabins with brigands guarding them. George Prince, bareheaded but shrouded in his cloak, showed in a patch of light behind Moa. He looked my way and then retreated into the lounge archway. Miko called.
You must yield. We want you, Haljan.
No doubt, I jeered.
Alive. It is easy to kill you.
I could not doubt that. Carter and I were little more than rats in a trap here in the chart room. But Miko wanted to take me alive. That was not so simple. He added persuasively,
We want you to help us navigate. Will you?
No.
Will you help us, Captain Carter? Tell your cub, this Haljan, to yield. You are fools. We understand that Haljan has been handling the ship's mathematics. Him we need most.
Carter roared.
Get back from there. This is no truce.
I shoved aside his leveled bullet projector. Wait a minute, I called to Miko. Navigate where?
Oh, he retorted. That is our business, not yours. When you lay down your weapons and come out of there, I will give you the course.
Back to the Earth? I suggested. I could fancy him grinning behind the sheen of his barrage at my questions.
The Earth? Yes, shall we go there? Give me your orders, Greg Haljan. Of course, I will obey them.
His sardonic words were interrupted, and I realized that all this parley was a ruse of Miko's to take me alive. He had made a gesture. Han, watching from the turret window, doubtless flashed a signal down to the hull corridors. The magnetizer control under the chart room was altered, our artificial gravity cut off. I felt the sudden lightness. I gripped the window casement and clung. Carter was startled into incautious movement. It flung him out into the center of the chart room, his arms and legs grotesquely flailing. And across the chart room, in the opposite window, I felt rather than saw the shape of something. A figure, almost invisible but not quite, was trying to climb in. I flung the empty rifle I was holding. It hit something solid in the window. In a flare of sparks, a black hooded figure materialized. A man climbing in! His weapon spat. There was a tiny electronic flash, deadly silent. The intruder had shot at Carter, struck him. Carter gave one queer scream. He had floated to the floor. His convulsive movement when he was hit hurled him to the ceiling. His body struck, twitched, bounced back and sank inert to the floor grid, almost at my feet. I clung to the casement. Across the space of the weightless room, the hooded intruder was also clinging. His hood fell back. It was Johnson. He leered at me.
Killed him, the bully. Well, he deserved it. Now for you, Mr. Third Officer Haljan.
But he did not fire at me. Miko had forbidden it. I saw him reach under his robe, doubtless for a low-powered paralyzing ray such as Miko had already used on me. But he never got it out. I had no weapon within reach. I leaned into the room, still holding the casement, and doubled my legs under me. I kicked out from the window. The force catapulted me across the space of the room like a volplane. I struck the purser. We gripped. Our locked, struggling bodies bounced out into the room. We struck the floor, surged up like balloons into the ceiling, struck it with a flailing arm or a leg, and floated back. Grotesque, abnormal combat. Like fighting in weightless water. Johnson clutched his weapon, but I twisted his wrist, held his arm outstretched so that he could not aim it. I was aware of Miko's voice shouting on the deck outside. Johnson's left hand was gouging at my face, his fingers plucking at my eyes. We lunged down to the floor, then up again, close to the ceiling. I twisted his wrists. He dropped the weapon and it sank away. I tried to reach it, but could not. Then I had him by the throat. I was stronger than he, and more agile. I tried choking him. his thick bull neck within my fingers. He kicked, scrambled, tore and gouged at me. Tried to shout, but it ended in a gargle. And then, as he felt his breath stopped, his hands came up in an effort to tear mine loose. We sank again to the floor. We were momentarily upright. I felt my feet touch. I bent my knees. We sank further. And then I kicked violently upward. Our locked bodies shot to the ceiling. Johnson's head was above me. It struck the steel roof of the chart room. A violent blow. I felt him go suddenly limp. I cast him off, doubling my body. I kicked at the ceiling. It sent me diagonally downward to the window, where I clung and regained stability. And I saw Miko standing on the deck with a weapon leveled at me. Chapter 13. The Torture.
Haljan, yield or I fire. Moa, give me the smaller one. This cursed...
He had in his hand too large a projector. Its ray would kill me. If he wanted to take me alive, he would not fire. I chanced it. No! I tried to draw myself beneath the window. An automatic bullet projector was on the floor where Carter had dropped it. I pulled myself down. Miko did not fire. I reached the revolver. The dead bodies of the captain and purser had drifted together on the floor in the center of the room. I hitched myself back to the window. With upraised weapon, I gazed cautiously out. Miko had disappeared. The deck within my line of vision was empty. But was it? Something told me to beware. I clung to the casement, ready upon the instant to shove myself down. There was a movement in the shadow along the deck. Then a figure rose up.
Don't fire, Haljan!
The sharp command, half appeal, stopped the pressure of my finger on the trigger of the automatic. It was the tall, lanky Englishman, Sir Arthur Coniston, as he called himself. So he, too, was one of Miko's band. The light through a dome window oh my gosh, what a sentence. The light through a dome window fell full on him.
If you fire, Haljan, and kill me, Miko will kill you then, surely.
From where he had been crouching, he could not command my window. But now, upon the heels of his placating words, he abruptly shot. The low-powered ray, had it struck, would have felled me without killing. But it went over my head as I dropped. Its aura made my senses reel. Coniston shouted, "Haljan!" I did not answer. I wondered if he would dare approach me to see if I had been hit. A minute passed. Then another. I thought I heard Miko's voice on the deck outside, but it was an aerial, microscopic whisper close beside me.
We see you, Haljan. You must yield.
Their eavesdropping vibrations, with audible projection, were upon me. I retorted aloud, "Come and get me! You cannot take me alive!" I do protest if this action of mine in the chart room may seem bravado. I had no wish to die. There was within me a very healthy desire for life. But I felt, by holding out, that some chance might come wherewith I might turn events against these brigands. Yet reason told me it was hopeless. Our loyal members of the crew were killed, no doubt. Captain Carter and Balk were killed. The lookouts and course masters also. And Blackstone. There remained only Dr. Frank and Snap. Their fate I did not yet know. And there was George Prince. He, perhaps, would help me if he could. But at best he was a dubious ally.
You are very foolish, Haljan,
murmured the projection of Miko's voice. And then I heard Coniston.
See here, why would not 100 pounds of gold leaf tempt you? The code words which were taken from Johnson, I mean to say, why not tell us where they are?
So that was one of the brigands' new difficulties. Snap had taken the code word sheet that time we sealed the purser in the cage. I said, "You'll never find them, And when a police ship sights us, what will you do then? The chances of a police ship were slim indeed, but the brigands evidently did not know that. I wondered again what had become of Snap. Was he captured, or still holding them off? I was watching my windows, for at any moment, under cover of all of this talk, I might be assailed. Gravity came suddenly to the room. Miko's voice said,
We mean well by you, Haljan. There is your normality. Join us. We need you to chart our course. And £100 of gold leaf, urged Coniston. Or more. Why, this treasure.
I could hear an oath from Miko, and then his ironic voice.
We will not bother you, Haljan. There is no hurry. You will be hungry in good time. And sleepy. Then we will come and get you. And a little acid will make you think differently about helping us.
His vibrations died away. The pull of gravity in the room was normal. I was alone in the dim silence, with the bodies of Carter and Johnson lying huddled on the grid. I bent to examine them. Both were dead. My isolation was no ruse this time. The outlaws made no further attack. Half an hour passed. The deck outside, what I could see of it, was vacant. Balk lay dead close outside the chart room door. The bodies of Blackstone and the course master had been removed from the turret window. A forward lookout, one of Miko's men, was on duty in the nearby tower. Han was at the turret controls. The ship was under orderly handling, heading back upon a new course. For the Earth or the Moon? It did not seem so. I found, in the chart room, a Benson curve light projector, which poor Captain Carter had very nearly assembled. I worked on it, trained it through my rear window, along the empty deck, bent it into the lounge archway. Upon my grid the image of the lounge interior presently focused. The passengers in the lounge were huddled in a group, disheveled, frightened, with Moa standing watching them. Stewards were serving them with a meal. Upon a bench, bodies were lying. Some were dead. I saw Rance Rankin. Others were evidently only injured. Dr. Frank was moving among them, attending them. Venza was there, unharmed. And I saw the gamblers, Shack and Dud, sitting white-faced, whispering together, and Glutz's little beribboned, becurled figure on a stool. George Prince was there, standing against the walls, shrouded in his mourning cloak, watching the scene with alert, roving eyes. And by the opposite doorway, the huge, towering figure of Miko stood on guard. But Snap was missing. A brief glimpse. Miko saw my Benson light. I could have equipped a heat ray and fired along the curved Benson light into that lounge, but Miko gave me no time. He slid the lounge door closed, and Moa leaped to close the one on my side. My light was cut off. My grid showed only the blank deck and door. Another interval. I had made plans. Futile plans. I could get into the turret, perhaps, and kill Han. I had the invisible cloak which Johnson was wearing. I took it from his body. Its mechanism could be repaired. Why, with it I could creep about the ship, kill these brigands one by one, perhaps. George Prince would be with me. The brigands who had been posing as the stewards and crew members were unable to navigate. They would obey my orders. There were only Miko, Coniston, and Han to kill. Futile plans. From my window I could gaze up to the helio room, and now abruptly I heard Snap's voice. "No! I tell you, no!" And Miko. "Very well, we will try this." So Snap was captured, but not killed. Relief swept me. He was in the helio room, and Miko was with him. But my relief was short-lived. After a brief interval, there came a moan from Snap. It floated down from the silence overhead. It made me shudder. My Benson beam shot into the helio window. It showed me Snap lying there on the floor. He was bound with wires. His torso had been stripped. His livid face was ghastly plain in my light. Miko was bending over him. Miko with a heat cylinder no longer than a finger. Its needle beam played upon Snap's naked chest. I could see the gruesome little trail of smoke rising, and as Snap twisted and jerked, there on his flesh was the red and blistered trail of the violet hot ray.
Now will you tell?
No! Miko laughed.
No? Then I shall write my name a little deeper.
A black scar now, a trail etched in the quivering flesh. Oh! Snap's face went white as chalk as he pressed his lips together.
Or a little acid? This fire writing does not really hurt? Tell me what you did with those code words.
No! In his absorption, Miko did not notice my light, nor did I have the wit to try and fire along it. I was trembling. Snap under torture. As the beam went deeper, Snap suddenly screamed. But he ended, "No! I will send no message for you!" It had been only a moment. In the chart room window beside me again a figure appeared. No image. A solid living person, undisguised by any cloak of invisibility. George Prince had chanced my fire and had crept up upon me. "Haljan, don't attack me!" I dropped my light connections. As impulsively I stood up, I saw through the window the figure of Coniston on the deck watching the result of Prince's venture. "Haljan, yield." Prince no more than whispered it. He stood outside on the deck. The low window casement touched his waist. He leaned over it. "He's torturing Snap. Call out that you will yield." The thought had already been in my mind. Another scream from Snap chilled me with horror. I shouted, "Miko, stop!" I rushed to the window and Prince gripped me. "Louder!" I called louder. "Miko, stop!" My upflung voice mingled with Snap's agony of protest. Then Miko heard me. His head and shoulders showed up there at the helio room oval.
You, Haljan?
Prince shouted, "I have made him yield. He will obey you if you stop that torture." I think that poor Snap must have fainted. He was silent. I called, "Stop! I will do what you command." Miko jeered.
That is good. A bargain. If you indeed obey me, disarm him, Prince, and bring him out.
Miko moved back into the helio room. On the deck, Coniston was advancing, but cautiously, mistrustful of me.
Greg?
George Prince flung a leg over the casement and leaped lightly into the dim chart room. His small, slender figure stood beside me, clung to me. "Greg?" A moment while we stood there together, no ray was upon us. Coniston could not see us, nor could he hear our whispers. "Greg?" A different voice, its throaty, husky quality gone. A soft, pleading, "Greg? Greg, don't you know me? Greg, dear?" Why, what was this? Not George Prince? A masquerader, yet so like George Prince. "Greg, don't you know me?" Clinging to me. A soft touch upon my arm. Fingers clinging. A surge of warm, tingling current was flowing between us. My sweep of instant thoughts. A speck of human earth dust falling free. That was George Prince who had been killed. George Prince's body, disguised by the scheming Carter and Dr. Frank, buried in the guise of his sister. And this black-robed figure who was trying to help us... Anita! Dear God, Anita, darling! Anita! "Greg, dear one! Anita, my God!" My arms went around her, my lips pressed hers. and felt her tremulous, eager answer. Greg, dear, Anita, you! The form of Coniston showed at our window. She cast me off. She said, with her throaty swagger of assumed masculinity, I have him, Sir Arthur. He will obey us. I sensed her warning glance. She shoved me toward the window. She said ironically, Have no fear, Haljan. You will not be tortured, you and Dean, if you obey our commands. Coniston gripped me. You fool! You caused us a lot of trouble, didn't you? Move along there! He jerked me roughly through the window, marched me the length of the deck, out to the stern space, opened the door of my cubby, flung me in, and sealed the door upon me. Miko will come presently. I stood in the darkness of my tiny room, listening to his retreating footsteps, but my mind was not on him. All the universe in that instant had changed for me. Anita was alive. To be continued.
And that is part two. Well, our part two anyway, of Brigands of the Moon by Ray Cummings. This taken from a excerpt. This excerpted from Astounding Stories of Super Science, March 1930. Next week, I guess, will be the first part of the April 1930 Astounding Stories of Super Science, which has the next part. They're all one in each month of those months, so it's pretty great. Pretty easy to keep track of. So yeah, pretty rad stuff. This has been, wow, quite a dramatic roller coaster, actually. This one's a lot of fun. I'm definitely enjoying myself. I mean, obviously, it being the 30s, there are some rather, by our perspective, dated views on femininity. But oh, that's what I should do. Is I should see if I can extract some of the images here, because they've got a couple illustrations, not very many, but a couple. And one of them has a nice shot of the I think it's the interior of the vessel. Um, and it's interesting. Lots of scaffolding. It looks pretty cool. It's actually pretty much how I imagined it based on the descriptions. It's really vivid, uh, and holds up fairly well, other than obviously the views on femininity. But values change over the years. But yeah, we'll keep doing that, and hopefully people are enjoying. I know I'm enjoying it. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, but I do streams every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. Um, this being Storytime Saturdays, where I do Storytime things. I tend to start those at about 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. On Mondays, I have a Mecha Mondays stream that I do, where I do something giant robot related or mecha adjacent. And then on Wednesdays, I have a Warframe Wednesday stream, where I do Warframe streaming. All right, folks, thanks for tuning in. Um, hopefully, hopefully people are enjoying. If you have any input, please feel free. Criticisms are good too. I take whatever I can get. And yeah, have a great day and enjoy. Stay safe out there. Um, don't panic. There's no need to panic yet. The world has not ended, just our perspective on civilization as we know it has been shifted and altered pretty dramatically. It has taken a knock. But the world won't end. The coronavirus, all the people who believe that burning down 5G cell towers will make a difference there. To the contrary, coronavirus will not, in fact, blow up the Earth. I doubt it will end the universe. Some personal universes, the inner spaces within ourselves, within some of us, it will change irrevocably, but whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, as they say. Some say, and again, losing all your limbs would not necessarily make you stronger unless it turns you into like a psychic or something with like telekinesis. That'd be pretty cool. I don't think that's how that works though. Comic books, am I right? All right, folks, have a great week and see you next time. Have a good one.